Entitlement can wear a smile. On a quiet, tree-lined street in an affluent suburb, a white woman behind the wheel of a luxury Tesla veers off the road and kills a black woman's dog without flinching. She steps out, not to apologize, but to check her bumper and mutter, "You people shouldn't walk where it's not safe." To her, the black woman kneeling beside her German shepherd is just another face, easy to dismiss. What she doesn't know is that Amara Thomas is a retired FBI counterintelligence agent. And with that one careless act, the woman behind the wheel just became her next mission. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning sun cast long shadows across Crest Hill's manicured lawns. Amara J. Thomas stood at her kitchen counter, watching her coffee maker drip methodically into the pot. The aroma filled her modern kitchen, a space that felt too big since Marcus passed 2 years ago. But at least she had Kobe. The elderly German shepherd lifted his gray muzzle from his bed in the corner, his tail thumping against the floor, as Amara reached for her favorite mug. Despite his arthritis, Kobe's eyes still held that same loyal sparkle they'd had for 12 years. "Almost ready, old friend," Amara said, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone used to carefully choosing their words. She poured her coffee into a steel travel mug, adding just a splash of cream. The routine was familiar, comforting. Wake up at 6, coffee by 7, walk with Kobe while the neighborhood was still quiet. Amara pulled on her navy windbreaker, practical, like everything else she owned. She'd never quite shed the habits from her FBI days, always scanning, always aware. The jacket concealed her athletic frame, made her look like just another retiree. That's how she preferred it now. "Come on, boy," she called, and Kobe rose slowly, his nails clicking against the hardwood floor. She clipped his leash, royal blue against his silver-flecked coat. Easy does it. Outside, spring had painted Crest Hill in pastels. Cherry blossoms dotted the perfectly maintained streets, and dew sparkled on million-dollar lawns. Amara and Kobe started their usual route, passing houses that could have been plucked from a real estate magazine. Mrs. Chen, tending to her roses, gave a polite wave. The Thompson kids, waiting for their private school bus, called out to Kobe. This was their rhythm, their place in this carefully orchestrated community. Amara returned the greetings with practiced warmth, keeping her distance, close enough to be neighborly, far enough to maintain privacy. They rounded onto Maple Drive, where orange construction barriers blocked the sidewalk. A sign announced, "Infrastructure improvements. Please use alternate route." But there was no alternate route, not without adding an extra mile to their walk. Kobe's joints couldn't handle that. "We'll just be quick," Amara murmured, guiding Kobe onto the street's edge. The morning traffic was light, and she kept them close to the curb, her eyes constantly scanning ahead and behind. The sound came first, the whine of an electric motor moving too fast for a residential zone. Amara turned, spotting the white Tesla cresting the hill behind them. The morning sun glinted off its windshield, obscuring the driver. "Kobe, come," she commanded sharply, tugging the leash. But Kobe's arthritic legs moved too slowly. The Tesla swerved, not away from them, but toward them. Amara yanked harder, her heart pounding. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice carrying the authority of her former profession. The impact was quick, brutal. Kobe's yelp cut through the morning quiet. The Tesla's brakes squealed as it finally stopped, 30 feet past them. Amara dropped to her knees beside Kobe, her hands trembling as they found his fur. His breathing was shallow, his eyes unfocused. Behind her, car doors opened and clicked shut. "Do you know how much these brakes cost?" The voice was sharp, entitled. "You shouldn't be in the street." Amara looked up. A woman in her early 40s stood there, Designer yoga wear perfectly coordinated, not a blonde hair out of place. Whitney Ashcroft Lowell. Amara recognized her from the neighborhood newsletter's endless coverage of her charity galas and political aspirations. "My dog is dying," Amara said, her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. "Call a vet." Whitney's perfectly lined eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't have been walking here. The sidewalk is clearly marked as closed." There was no other route. Amara cradled Kobe's head as his breathing grew more labored. "There's always another route," Whitney said, checking her Tesla's front bumper for damage. "You people just think you can go wherever you want. This is a private neighborhood." The words hung in the air like poison. Amara's jaw tightened. 26 years in the FBI had taught her to read between lines, to hear what people really meant. "I've lived here for 15 years. "Well," Whitney's smile was sharp as glass, "maybe it's time to consider somewhere more appropriate. I hear the East Side is lovely." Kobe shuddered in Amara's arms. His tail gave one final weak wag against the pavement. "He's just a dog," Whitney said, already turning back to her car. "I'll have my assistant send you a check for the inconvenience." She said it like she was offering to pay for a scratched mailbox, not a family member's life. The Tesla's door closed with a soft thunk. The electric motor hummed as Whitney drove away, leaving Amara kneeling on the asphalt with her dead dog in her arms. Years of training kept Amara's face composed, even as tears threatened to fall. She looked down at Kobe's still form, at the gray muzzle that had nuzzled her awake every morning, at the paws that had padded alongside her through Marcus's funeral, through empty rooms, through lonely nights. "You don't know who I am," Amara said quietly, her words barely a whisper. "But you will." With the strength that had carried her through decades of service, Amara lifted Kobe's body. His weight settled against her chest one final time. She turned toward home, her steps measured and deliberate, grief hardening into something else entirely with each step. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows through Amara's living room windows. She stood in her doorway, keys dangling limply from her fingers, the emergency vet's paperwork tucked under her arm. The house felt hollow now, each footstep echoing where Kobe's nails should have clicked against the floor. Time of death, 7:42 a.m. Cause, severe internal trauma. The vet's clinical words replayed in her mind as she set her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, the one Marcus had made in that pottery class after retirement. Another ghost in a house full of them. Amara moved through her home with the measured steps of someone trying not to disturb the silence. In the kitchen, Kobe's water bowl still held the morning's fresh water, tiny ripples from the air conditioning making it shimmer. His food bowl sat half full, kibble arranged in a perfect circle from where he'd eaten around the edges, just like always. She picked up both bowls, her fingers tracing their cool ceramic edges. The weight of them felt wrong now. Empty, like everything else. She placed them in a cabinet, unable to throw them away just yet. In the living room, Kobe's bed dominated the corner by the bay window, his favorite spot for afternoon sunbathing. The fabric still held the impression of his body, a perfect circle where he'd turned 3 times before settling down. A collection of toys surrounded it. The rope toy he'd loved as a puppy, but had become too gentle to play with in his older years, the squeaky duck missing its squeaker, the tennis ball worn smooth from countless games of fetch. Amara knelt beside the bed, her knees protesting against the hardwood floor. One by one, she gathered the toys, each one a memory. The rope toy from Marcus, who'd laughed at how the tiny puppy had dragged it everywhere. The duck from their first Christmas together. The tennis ball from their last summer at the lake house. She found a cardboard box in the garage and lined it with one of Kobe's blankets. Each toy went in carefully, arranged as if they might still matter to someone. The bed followed, folded with military precision. She couldn't bring herself to close the box. Not yet. Then the landline rang. She let it ring twice before answering, unsure why she even picked it up. The number was masked. "Ms. Thomas," said a clipped, composed male voice. "This is Darren Lowell. I represent my wife, Whitney Ashcroft Lowell. I understand there was an incident this morning." Amara stood in her kitchen, one hand resting on Kobe's empty food bowl. "You could call it that," she said. Darren didn't acknowledge her tone. "Let me be clear. My wife is quite shaken by the confrontation. But we're reasonable people. We'd prefer to resolve this amicably, privately." There was a pause, followed by the subtle sound of papers being shuffled. "We're prepared to offer a settlement for your loss. Vet expenses, emotional distress, whatever you deem fair. I can have my assistant deliver the funds within the hour." "How generous," Amara said dryly. "We'd prefer to avoid any unnecessary escalation. These things get messy when people allow emotions to cloud judgment. It's best if this doesn't become a narrative." Amara said nothing. "My assistant will leave the envelope on your porch. Please consider it." He hung up before she could answer. 40 minutes later, a sleek black town car rolled up her driveway. A young man in a tailored blazer stepped out, placed a thick white envelope at her doorstep, and left without knocking. Amara picked it up. Heavy, neatly sealed. It smelled faintly of cologne and contempt. That evening, as the sun began to fall behind the trees, she stepped out onto the stone patio. The fire pit, one of Marcus's last projects, sat cold and waiting. She lit a long match. The envelope burned slowly. Crisp bills curled and blackened, flickering in the wind before collapsing into ash. Inside, the house was silent again. Amara walked to her study, opened the safe hidden behind the painting of the Virginia coastline. Her fingers moved over the keypad with mechanical precision. The door hissed open. Inside, rows of encrypted hard drives, a line of burner phones, and a manila envelope marked in clean, deliberate handwriting. Project Swan Song. The study felt different in the evening light. Shadows stretched across Amara's desk like prison bars as she settled into her leather chair. The sealed manila envelope from the safe placed carefully before her. Through the window, crickets had begun their nightly chorus, a sound that usually brought peace. Tonight, it felt like a countdown. She reached for her secure phone. Not the everyday smartphone on her desk, but a modified device she'd kept maintained even after retirement. Old habits died hard in counterintelligence. The phone powered up silently, its screen casting a blue glow across her features. Her fingers moved across the keypad, muscle memory taking over as she entered a series of codes. The phone connected to a private network, one that existed in the spaces between normal communications. She'd helped design it during her FBI days, back when she and Calvin had realized how vulnerable standard channels were. Calvin! Just thinking about him brought a slight smile to her face. While others saw a quiet tech analyst, she'd known him as one of the most brilliant minds in cybersecurity. They'd worked together for 15 years, dismantling international spy networks and exposing corruption at the highest levels. When he'd left the bureau to start his own firm, she'd been his first client. The phone chirped once, indicating a secure connection. Amara typed a message using their old shorthand. Mockingbird to Raven, Channel 7. 3 minutes passed. The crickets kept singing. Then the phone buzzed, a private video call request. She accepted, and Calvin's familiar face filled the screen. He looked exactly as she remembered. Salt and pepper hair cropped short, wire-rimmed glasses, and eyes that missed nothing. Mockingbird, he said, his voice carrying through encrypted channels. It's been a minute. You're using the emergency protocols. They made a mistake, Amara replied simply. I'm going active. Need swan song. Calvin's expression shifted subtly. In their years together, he'd learned to read between her words. What kind of mistake are we talking about? The kind that ends with a dead dog and hush money. His eyes narrowed behind his glasses. Details. Amara recounted the morning's events in precise, measured terms. The construction. The Tesla. Whitney's words. Darren's visit. With each detail, Calvin's expression grew darker. I know that name, he said when she finished. Whitney Ashcroft Lowell. Her family's got fingers in some interesting pies. Defense contracts, private security firms, judicial campaign funding. I need everything, Amara said. Every digital footprint, every financial thread, every connection. Calvin leaned back in his chair, light from multiple monitors reflecting off his glasses. Swan song protocols? That's heavy artillery, Amara. You sure about this? They killed Kobe, Calvin, then tried to buy my silence with cash and condescension. Kobe? Calvin's voice softened. He'd met the dog many times, had even dog sat during Amara's rare vacations. I'm really sorry. Silence stretched between them, filled with years of shared understanding. Finally, Calvin nodded. Give me 12 hours to set up secure channels. We'll need to route everything through ghost servers. These people have resources. Thank you, Calvin. Don't thank me yet. This could get messy. The call ended, and Amara turned to her desk. From a hidden drawer, she retrieved a laptop that looked ordinary but contained security measures that would impress government agencies. Biometric scanners hidden in the keyboard read her fingerprints as she typed, matching them against stored patterns. The screen came to life, displaying a simple prompt. Project Swansong authorization required. She entered a 40-character password, then leaned forward for a retinal scan. The system processed for several seconds before granting access. Files appeared. Years of collected data, surveillance protocols, and network analysis tools. She'd maintained them even after retirement, updating the software regularly. Some might call it paranoid. She called it prepared. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up vehicle registration databases. Whitney's Tesla was easy to find. A 2023 Model S Plaid, custom ordered in pearl white. The vehicle's connected features made it a wealth of information. GPS data, dash cam footage, system logs. A parallel window displayed Whitney's social media presence. Most accounts were private, but that meant little to someone with Amara's resources. Posts from that morning began populating the screen. Location tags, check-ins, comments. Then she saw it, posted at 7:47 a.m., just 5 minutes after Kobe's death. A perfectly staged photo at Le Petit Bistro. Whitney's manicured hand holding a mimosa glass. Her designer watch was clearly visible, as was her bright smile. The caption read, "When trash tries to ruin your day, brunch saves it." Amara stared at the screen, her face illuminated by its glow. The timestamp burned into her vision. 7:47 a.m. 5 minutes. It had taken Whitney just 5 minutes to go from killing a dog and hurling racial slurs to sipping mimosas and posting about trash. The crickets outside had gone quiet, as if they too were holding their breath. In the stillness of her study, surrounded by the tools of her former trade, Amara sat motionless. Her expression remained unreadable, but her eyes never left the screen, never blinked, as if photographing every pixel of Whitney's smiling face into her memory. The post had 47 likes, each one a person who saw nothing wrong with Whitney's words, each one a potential thread in a larger tapestry of privilege and prejudice, each one a possible lead. The laptop's fan hummed softly, waiting for her next command. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the study before plunging it back into shadow. Amara remained still, her gaze fixed on Whitney's smiling face, her own expression a mask of perfect calm. The morning sun cast long shadows across the brick facade of the Crest Hill police station. Amara straightened her blazer, navy blue, professional, intentionally chosen, before climbing the concrete steps. The building's glass doors reflected her image, composed, dignified, every hair in place. Nothing about her appearance suggested she'd spent the night analyzing social media posts and security protocols. Inside, the station hummed with typical morning activity. Officers shuffled papers, phones rang, and the coffee maker in the corner gurgled. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and stale donuts. At the front desk, a young officer looked up from his computer. "Good morning," Amara said, her voice steady. "I need to file a report about a vehicular incident from yesterday morning." The officer, his nameplate read Officer Davis, nodded and pulled out a form. "Nature of the incident? A Tesla Model S struck and killed my dog on Maple Drive. The driver left the scene after a verbal confrontation." Davis's fingers hesitated over his keyboard. "Was anyone injured?" "My dog was killed instantly." "I mean any people, ma'am." Amara felt her jaw tighten but kept her voice level. "No. But the driver, Whitney Ashcroft Lowell, was speeding in a residential zone and made no attempt to avoid collision." At the mention of Whitney's name, something shifted in Davis's expression. He glanced toward a senior officer's desk, then back to his screen. "Let me get Sergeant Palmer for this one." 3 minutes later, Sergeant Palmer emerged from his office. He was tall, well-built, with graying temples and a carefully maintained mustache. His smile seemed practiced. "Mrs. Thomas? I'm Sergeant Palmer. Why don't we discuss this in my office?" The office was small but neat, with framed commendations on the walls and a photo of Palmer shaking hands with Whitney at what appeared to be a police fundraiser. Amara noted it without changing expression. "So," Palmer began, settling behind his desk, "I understand there was an incident with Mrs. Ashcroft Lowell yesterday?" "Yes. At approximately 7:42 a.m., she struck and killed my dog while speeding through a construction zone on Maple Drive. She then left the scene after making several inappropriate comments." Palmer nodded sympathetically. "I see. And you're certain about the speed? These Teslas, they're very quiet. Sometimes it's hard to judge." "I'm a retired federal agent, Sergeant. I'm trained to assess vehicle speeds. She was doing at least 40 in a 25 zone." "Federal agent?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "Well, then you understand how these things work. Without camera footage or independent witnesses, it's really just an unfortunate accident. These construction zones can be confusing." Amara leaned forward slightly. "I'd like to file an official report." Of course. Palmer pulled out a form but didn't start writing. "Though I should mention, Mr. Lowell already called this morning. Said they'd reached a private agreement with you? Something about compensation? I'd still like to file a report." Palmer's smile tightened. "Mrs. Thomas, let me be frank. These situations are always unfortunate, but without clear evidence of wrongdoing, pursuing this could be complicated. Mrs. Ashcroft Lowell is a prominent member of our community. She chairs our Police Foundation's annual fundraiser." "Are you refusing to take my report, Sergeant?" "Not at all. I'm simply suggesting that sometimes these things are better handled privately. No need to make it official." Amara watched him for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she reached into her bag and retrieved a small recorder. "I'd like to confirm, you're choosing not to file an official report about a hit-and-run incident involving property damage and leaving the scene?" Palmer's smile vanished. "Now, I never said that. I'm happy to take your statement." He picked up his pen, finally starting to fill out the form. "Though I should warn you, false reports can lead to serious consequences." 20 minutes later, Amara left the station with a copy of the report. It listed the incident as Accidental collision with animal. No citation issued. She folded the paper carefully and placed it in her bag, next to the recorder. That evening, Amara's study glowed with the light of multiple monitors. Calvin's face filled one screen, lines of code scrolled across another. The neighborhood's security system is pretty basic, Calvin said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Gated community cameras, private home systems, all feeding into a central hub. Give me 5 minutes. The gate camera at Maple Grove had a clear view, Amara replied, her own screens displaying network diagrams. I saw it yesterday during my walk. Got it. Accessing now. There's footage from yesterday morning. Downloading. They worked in comfortable silence. Years of partnership making words unnecessary. After several minutes, Calvin spoke again. Files clean. Playing now. The footage was crisp, captured from an elevated angle. Amara watched herself and Kobe appear in frame, walking along the road's edge, where construction barriers blocked the sidewalk. Then the white Tesla entered the shot. The video had no audio, but it didn't need it. The Tesla's trajectory was clear, a deliberate swerve toward the right, directly at Kobe. The impact. Amara lifting Kobe's body. But what made Amara's breath catch was what happened next. Through the Tesla's clear windows, Whitney and another woman were visible, their heads thrown back in laughter. The passenger, who Amara recognized as Whitney's friend from her social media posts, actually clapped her hands. They were still laughing as the car drove away. I'm running it through enhancement software, Calvin said quietly. We'll be able to see their faces clearly. Amara sat very still, watching the footage loop again. The swerve, the impact, the laughter. Each replay burned itself deeper into her memory. It wasn't an accident, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Calvin agreed. It wasn't. The Crest Hill Community Center buzzed with activity as residents filed into the main hall for the Save Crest Hill Town Hall meeting. Amara adjusted her cream-colored silk blazer, a calculated choice that spoke of old money and quiet sophistication. She'd spent an hour selecting her outfit, tailored black slacks, pearl earrings, and subtle makeup that softened her features. Every detail crafted to blend seamlessly into Whitney's world. Through the glass doors, Amara could see campaign posters already mounted on easels. Preserve our values and keep Crest Hill safe, in elegant navy and gold. Volunteers in matching T-shirts directed people to their seats. Their practiced smiles mirror images of the woman who'd trained them. Amara chose a seat in the middle section. Not too close, not too far. Perfect vantage point. She watched as Whitney worked the room, moving from group to group with practiced grace. The socialite wore a pale pink sheath dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, and her diamond tennis bracelet caught the light with every gesture. Thank you all for coming, Whitney began, taking the podium. Her voice carried that particular tone of manufactured warmth that politicians perfect. We're here today because we care deeply about preserving what makes Crest Hill special. Amara observed the crowd's reaction. Heads nodded, phones lowered. Whitney had them captivated. Our community faces unprecedented challenges, Whitney continued, her expression concerned but hopeful. New development proposals threaten our historic character. Outside interests push for zoning changes that would forever alter our neighborhood's unique charm. The coded language wasn't subtle to Amara's trained ear. Historic character meant keeping certain people out. Outside interests meant anyone who challenged the status quo. That's why I'm announcing my candidacy for city council. Whitney smiled as applause erupted. Because Crest Hill deserves a voice that understands our values, our heritage, our way of life. More applause. Amara clapped too, her face showing just the right amount of enthusiasm. She watched Whitney's body language shift as she detailed her platform, the slight tension in her shoulders when discussing community safety, the practiced pause before property values. "We need to act now," Whitney's voice rose with practiced emotion. "Before it's too late. Before Crest Hill becomes unrecognizable. That's why I'm forming the Neighborhood Preservation Committee, a group of dedicated residents committed to protecting our community's future." The presentation continued with charts showing crime statistics, carefully selected, property values, strategically highlighted, and proposed zoning changes, artfully misrepresented. Whitney handled questions with polished ease, never losing her composed smile. "What about affordable housing initiatives?" someone asked. "While we support diversity," Whitney replied smoothly, "we must ensure any new development maintains Crest Hill's architectural standards and property values. It's about preserving quality of life for everyone." Amara made notes on a leather-bound notebook, playing the role of engaged citizen. She documented Whitney's key phrases, noting which ones drew the strongest reactions. The crowd was eating it up, especially the older residents who nodded vigorously at every mention of preservation and safety. After the formal presentation, Whitney held court near a refreshment table laden with expensive pastries and coffee in real china cups. Amara waited patiently, watching as Whitney charmed a group of elderly women with promises about increased police patrols. Finally, Amara approached, carrying her coffee cup with perfect poise. She'd practiced this moment, calibrating every detail of her persona. "Mrs. Ashcroft Lowell," she said warmly, extending her hand. "What an inspiring presentation. I'm Marla Jenkins." Whitney turned, her campaign smile firmly in place. "Thank you so much for coming, Mrs. Jenkins. Are you new to Crest Hill? Please, call me Marla. And yes, I moved here 6 months ago after my husband passed. The community has been so welcoming." Amara's voice carried just the right note of grateful widow. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Whitney's expression shifted to practiced sympathy. "It must be quite an adjustment." "It is. But that's why your words about preserving community really resonated with me. I'd love to help however I can." Whitney's eyes sparked with interest. "Have you done any community organizing before?" "I served on several boards in Atlanta," Amara replied, the background story she'd crafted rolling smoothly off her tongue. "Mostly fundraising for arts and education. Nothing as important as what you're doing here." Whitney's smile widened. Amara could practically see the calculations running behind her eyes. Wealthy widow, experienced with fundraising, and, most importantly, a black woman who could help deflect accusations of exclusion. "We could absolutely use someone with your experience on the committee," Whitney said, reaching for a business card. "We're having a planning session this Friday at my home. Very casual, just a few key members discussing strategy. Would you be interested?" "I'd be honored." Amara accepted the card with just the right amount of enthusiasm. "What time should I arrive?" 7 o'clock. We'll have wine and hors d'oeuvres." Whitney touched Amara's arm in a gesture of false intimacy. "I have a feeling you'll be a wonderful addition to our team, Marla." "That means so much coming from you." Amara smiled, her expression perfect, while her mind catalogued every detail. The slight condescension in Whitney's tone, the assumption of immediate familiarity, the calculated way she'd positioned them to be visible to others. They exchanged phone numbers, Whitney already talking about introducing Marla to just the right people in the community. Amara played her role flawlessly, grateful, eager, and just deferential enough to feed Whitney's sense of superiority. "I'll see you Friday, then," Whitney said warmly, already shifting her attention to the next person waiting to speak with her. "Looking forward to it," Amara replied, her smile never wavering. The next afternoon, Amara sat in her parked car outside Le Petit Jardin, Crest Hill's most exclusive French bistro. The valet line stretched with luxury vehicles, Mercedes, Bentleys, and, yes, several Teslas. She checked her reflection one last time, adjusting her silk scarf and diamond studs, carefully selected pieces that whispered old money without screaming it. Whitney had texted early that morning. "Darling Marla, please join us for an intimate brunch. Just a few friends who'd love to meet you. 11:30 at Le Petit. Don't be late." Inside, the maitre d' led Amara to a private room where crystal chandeliers cast soft light over hand-painted walls. 8 women sat around an elegant table, all dressed in what they probably considered casual brunch attire, designer sundresses, and enough jewelry to fund a small nation. "Marla!" Whitney rose, extending both hands in welcome. "Everyone, this is Marla Jenkins, our newest committee member. She's absolutely brilliant with fundraising." Amara noted how Whitney positioned her directly across from herself, close enough to watch, far enough to study. The introductions flowed. Catherine Morrison, wife of Superior Court Judge Morrison; Patricia Whitman, whose husband chaired the police commission; Sandra Chen Brooks, who handled special projects for the mayor's office. "We were just discussing Whitney's campaign strategy," Catherine said, signaling for more mimosas. "The timing couldn't be better, with the redistricting vote coming up." Whitney smiled, running a manicured finger around her wine glass. "The current council is, shall we say, susceptible to pressure. But we need someone who understands Crest Hill's unique needs." "Unique needs?" Amara asked innocently, taking a small bite of her croque, madame. "Property values, dear," Patricia leaned in. "These proposed affordable housing units would devastate the market, not to mention the element they'd attract." Amara watched Whitney's face carefully. No reaction to the casual racism, just that same practiced smile. "Of course," Whitney added smoothly. "We support diversity. But there are proper channels, proper procedures, proper donors," Sandra murmured, and several women laughed softly. Whitney's eyes sparkled. "Let's just say we have friends who understand the importance of keeping Crest Hill. Friends who ensure the right decisions get made." "It takes resources to protect a community's character," Catherine agreed. "Thankfully, Whitney knows exactly which wheels need greasing." Amara widened her eyes in calculated admiration. "That's impressive. Most candidates struggle with fundraising their first time out." "Oh, I'm not most candidates," Whitney preened. "We have a network of concerned citizens who believe in preserving traditional values. They're very generous when it comes to protecting their interests." "Speaking of protection," Patricia cut in, "did you handle that situation with that woman? The one making noise about her dog?" Amara kept her expression neutral, spreading butter on a croissant with steady hands. Whitney waved dismissively. "Darren took care of it. Money usually quiets these people down. And if not," she shrugged delicately, "we have other ways." "I'd love to contribute," Amara said, letting enthusiasm color her voice, "both financially and strategically. My late husband always said political influence was the best investment." Whitney's eyes lit up. "We should discuss that privately. There are specific channels we use to ensure everyone's interests are protected." "Of course," Amara nodded. "I understand completely." The conversation drifted to safer topics: charity galas, summer homes, private school admissions. Amara played her role perfectly, sharing just enough carefully crafted details about her life in Atlanta to seem authentic while staying vague enough to avoid verification. After brunch, Whitney pulled her aside. "Dinner at my house next week. Just a few key supporters. We can discuss investment opportunities then." That night, Amara sat in her study, surrounded by screens displaying data feeds. Calvin's face filled one monitor, his expression grim. "You were right," he said, typing rapidly. I cross-referenced the names from your brunch against our old cases. Catherine Morrison's husband dismissed 3 major corruption cases last year alone. Patricia Whitman's spouse buried evidence in multiple police misconduct investigations. And Sandra Chen Brooks? Shell companies, lots of them, all linking back to offshore accounts that coincidentally make large donations to local campaigns. Amara pinned photos on a digital board, drawing connections. Whitney's not just running for office, she's their newest puppet. These people have serious protection, Calvin warned. Federal-level coverage, private security firms, the kind of resources that make problems disappear. Like a black woman and her dog? Amara's voice was quiet but sharp. Exactly. Calvin paused. I'm tracking their financial networks now. It's sophisticated, professional. They're laundering campaign contributions through at least 12 different front companies. Amara studied the growing web of connections on her screen. Judges, police commissioners, property developers, all linked by nearly invisible threads of money and influence. Send me everything you find, she said, adding another line to her diagram. Every transaction, every meeting, every phone call. We're going to map this entire network. Already on it. But Amara, Calvin hesitated. These people, they don't just break laws. They write them. Then it's time someone rewrote their story. Amara zoomed in on Whitney's photo, centered in the web of corruption. Keep digging, especially into their judicial connections. I want to know every case they've influenced, every verdict they've bought. She worked late into the night, building her map of influence and corruption. Names connected to shell companies, companies connected to judges, judges connected to verdicts. A complex dance of power and money, all choreographed to keep certain people in control, and others in their place. Amara adjusted her designer blazer as she strode through the gleaming lobby of Lowell Development Group. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of downtown Richmond, a testament to the empire Darren had built. Or stolen, depending on who you asked. She'd scheduled this meeting as Marla Jenkins, potential investor. The receptionist directed her to the top floor, where Darren's assistant, a nervous young man named Trevor, greeted her. Mr. Lowell will be with you shortly, Trevor said, leading her to a conference room. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Water would be lovely. Amara smiled warmly. She'd done her homework on Trevor. Fresh out of college, desperate to climb the corporate ladder, and, most importantly, eager to impress. The conference room walls displayed architectural renderings of luxury developments. Amara studied them while she waited, noting how they all centered in historically black neighborhoods. Gentrification dressed up in watercolor and glass. Darren entered with his trademark confident stride. Ms. Jenkins, wonderful to meet you. He extended his hand. Whitney mentioned you're interested in our upcoming projects. Your wife speaks very highly of your work, Amara said, shaking his hand firmly. I'm particularly interested in your strategy for managing community resistance. Darren's smile didn't waver. We prefer to focus on the positive impact of neighborhood renewal. Property values rise, crime drops. Everyone benefits. Everyone who can afford to stay, Amara noted mildly. Progress requires change, Darren replied smoothly. But let's discuss numbers. We're launching 3 new developments next quarter. For the next hour, they reviewed proposals and projections. Amara played her role perfectly, asking just enough technical questions to seem knowledgeable while letting Darren dominate the conversation. His ego made him careless. These profit margins are impressive, she said, examining a spreadsheet. Especially given current market conditions. We have certain advantages, Darren smiled. Strong relationships with zoning boards, efficient tax structures. I'd love to see more detailed financials before committing, Amara said. My accountants are quite thorough. Darren's expression cooled slightly. Of course. Trevor can provide our public documentation. Public documentation? Amara laughed lightly. Dear, I'm talking about serious investment. I need to see the real numbers. The offshore arrangements Whitney mentioned? Darren's face tightened. I don't recall my wife discussing that. At brunch, Amara said smoothly. She was quite impressed with your financial architecture. The Cayman structure, particularly. Before Darren could respond, Trevor burst in with fresh water and coffee. Here you are. And Mr. Lowell, I pulled those Cayman Holdings reports you wanted for the board meeting. They're on your desktop now. The silence was thick enough to cut. Darren's jaw clenched. Thank you, Trevor, he said tightly. That will be all. Trevor withered under Darren's glare as he backed out of the room. My assistant sometimes gets confused, Darren said carefully. We maintain standard corporate structures, nothing exotic. Of course, Amara smiled. Though in my experience the best opportunities often require creative solutions. Perhaps we should table this discussion until you're more comfortable sharing details? She stood, gathering her belongings. I'll have my team review the public materials first. Trevor can send them over? Darren nodded stiffly. I'll walk you out. As they passed Darren's office, Amara paused. Oh, I left my phone. She patted her pockets. May I? Trevor will check, Darren said quickly. No need to bother him. It'll just take a moment. Amara was already moving toward the office, leaving Darren to either physically stop her or awkwardly follow. He followed. The office was a monument to power. Heavy mahogany desk, leather chairs, yet another stunning view. And there, on the desk, sat an open laptop. Amara made a show of checking around the chairs while palming a small USB drive from her sleeve. As Darren moved to his desk, she found her phone under a magazine. Here it is! How embarrassing. She straightened up, accidentally bumping the desk. The USB drive slipped into a port as she steadied herself. I'm so sorry. No harm done, Darren said, though his eyes tracked her every move. Back in the lobby, Amara shook his hand again. I look forward to reviewing those materials. Such an impressive operation you run here. The drive had needed just 90 seconds to clone his desktop and install a backdoor. By the time she reached her car, Calvin was already accessing the system remotely. That evening, Amara's study hummed with activity as multiple screens displayed financial data. Calvin's face filled one monitor as they analyzed the findings. It's worse than we thought, he said, scrolling through documents. They're running millions through shell companies, then splitting it into smaller donations to dodge reporting requirements. Show me the money flow, Amara said. A complex diagram appeared. Lines connected offshore accounts to seemingly legitimate businesses, then branched into hundreds of individual political contributions. See these patterns? Calvin highlighted several transactions. Money moves from the Cayman accounts through their real estate holdings, gets cleaned through various contractors, then emerges as campaign donations to judges, police union PACs, and local officials. All just under the reporting threshold, Amara noted. Exactly. And look at the timing. Calvin pulled up a timeline. Large transfers happen right before major zoning decisions, judicial appointments, police oversight votes. They're buying the whole system, Amara said quietly. Not just influence. Actual control. The real estate angle is genius, Calvin admitted. They use construction contracts to justify large cash movements, building materials, labor costs, consulting fees, all inflated to hide the real payments. Amara studied the data. Can you trace it back to individual decisions? Specific cases? Working on it. Calvin's fingers flew over his keyboard. Already found 3 judges who received donations right before ruling in Lowell's favor on development disputes. And look at these police union contributions. They spike whenever there's community opposition to their projects. Protection money, Amara said. Paid through official channels. This is high-level stuff, Amara. Professional money laundering, expert legal coverage. They've built a machine that turns corruption into legitimate-looking business. Amara leaned back, processing the implications. Keep following the money. I want to know every person they've bought, every decision they've influenced. We need to understand exactly how deep this goes. The screens continued flowing with data late into the night, painting a picture of power and corruption that stretched far beyond one entitled woman and her dead dog. This was systematic, institutional, and now, finally exposed. Amara's phone buzzed on her nightstand, jolting her awake. The screen glowed with an urgent news alert. Her stomach dropped as she read the headline, "Local Tech CEO Arrested for Cyber Terrorism Plot." She sat up quickly, fully alert now. The morning sun barely filtered through her curtains as she clicked the link with trembling fingers. A video began playing. Grainy surveillance footage showing armed agents swarming Calvin's apartment building. They dragged him out in handcuffs, still wearing his pajamas. Prominent cybersecurity consultant Calvin Ruiz was arrested early this morning, the news anchor's voice reported. Sources say he's suspected of orchestrating a sophisticated cyber attack targeting multiple financial institutions. Federal authorities declined to comment on specific charges. Amara's mind raced. This wasn't random. The timing was too perfect. She grabbed her secure laptop and began checking their communication channels. Everything was dark. Calvin's entire network had gone silent. She paced her study, phone pressed to her ear as she tried Calvin's lawyer. No answer. His emergency contacts. Nothing. It was like he'd been completely cut off from the world. The morning news droned on in the background as she worked. Mr. Ruiz's company, SecureNet Solutions, has contracts with several major corporations and government agencies. Sources suggest the investigation centers around potential misuse of classified systems. "This isn't your fault, Calvin," Amara muttered, though she knew this wasn't his fault. They'd been careful. Too careful for a routine investigation to catch him. This was targeted. She pulled up their latest data transfers from Darren's system. Everything looked clean on the surface, but something must have triggered an alert. Some hidden tripwire they'd missed. Her doorbell rang, making her jump. Through the security camera, she saw two men in dark suits on her porch. Federal agents, based on their stance and the subtle bulge of shoulder holsters. Amara quickly activated her emergency protocols. Drives began wiping themselves. Cloud servers disconnected. Years of FBI training kicked in as she prepared for the worst. But the agents didn't break down her door. They waited patiently, rang again, then left a card and departed. She watched them drive away before retrieving the card. It was blank except for a phone number. Her burner phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email." Amara opened her encrypted email client. A new message waited. Sender unknown. The subject line read, "Your friend's future." Inside was a video file. She ran it through 3 virus scans before playing it. The footage showed Calvin in an interrogation room, looking tired but unharmed. A timestamp in the corner showed it was from less than an hour ago. Below the video was a simple message. "You push too hard. Walk away, or he disappears." Amara's hands clenched into fists. They were using Calvin to get to her. Someone in Darren's network, someone with serious government connections, had discovered their investigation. She began methodically checking their security measures. The back door into Darren's system was still active, but she didn't dare access it now. They'd be watching. Their encrypted chat channels were compromised. Even her secure email might be monitored. The morning news continued its coverage. They showed Calvin's company logo, his professional headshot. clips of confused employees being turned away from their office building. His reputation was being systematically destroyed. "Breaking update," the anchor announced. Federal sources now confirm the investigation involves potential espionage charges. If convicted, Mr. Ruiz could face up to life in prison. Amara's throat tightened. Espionage charges meant they could hold him indefinitely. No bail, limited legal access, possibly even a closed trial. They could make Calvin disappear into the system. Her personal phone rang. Whitney's number. Amara let it go to voicemail, then played the message. "Marla, darling." Whitney's voice dripped with false concern. Or, should I say, "Agent Thomas? I just heard the terrible news about your friend." These things happen when people don't know their place. "Call me if you'd like to discuss it." So Whitney knew her real identity. The facade was over. Amara deleted the message and began planning her next move. She couldn't abandon Calvin, but any wrong step now could make things worse. Her computer chimed with another anonymous email. This one contained a single image. Calvin's daughter at college, photographed through a telephoto lens. The message was clear. They could reach anyone. Amara stood at her window, watching the quiet suburban street. Somewhere out there, powerful people were mobilizing against her. Her mission was compromised. Every digital trail, every piece of evidence they'd gathered, was now a potential weapon against them. The burner phone buzzed one final time. 24 hours to confirm you're walking away. Then, decisions become permanent. She placed the phone down carefully, her mind already shifting from investigation to survival mode. They'd pushed too far, too fast. Now, Calvin was paying the price, and she had to find a way to protect him without losing everything they'd uncovered. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across her study. The news had moved on to other stories, but the image of Calvin being dragged away played over and over in her mind. Somewhere in a federal holding cell, her friend was alone, possibly facing life in prison, because he'd tried to help her find justice. The evening sun cast long shadows across Whitney's private office in the Ashcroft building. She sat at the head of a mahogany conference table, surrounded by 6 people, her campaign manager, 2 lawyers, a PR specialist, and 2 political consultants. Files and tablets were spread across the polished surface. "Let's be clear about our strategy," Whitney said, tapping her manicured nails on a stack of documents. "This woman is a threat to everything we've built, but she's also given us the perfect opportunity." Her campaign manager, Mike Davidson, adjusted his tie. "The FBI connection is gold. We can spin this any way we want." "Exactly." Whitney smiled, pulling up a document on her tablet. "Our private investigators found quite a story. Amara Thomas, decorated agent turned bitter retiree. Living alone, no family, just that dog she was so upset about. Classic profile of someone who's lost touch with reality." The PR specialist, Sarah Chen, made notes on her laptop. "We can work with that. Frame it as a concerned community response to erratic behavior. The restraining order will add legitimacy. Speaking of which," Whitney turned to her lead attorney, "is the paperwork ready?" James Morrison, a silver-haired lawyer who'd handled the Lowells' legal matters for decades, slid a thick folder across the table. "All prepared. We've documented every instance of her attending your events under false pretenses. Added the unauthorized access to your husband's business records. The judge owes us a favor. He'll expedite the hearing." Whitney reviewed the restraining order application, her lips curving into a satisfied smile. The document painted a compelling picture. A disturbed former federal agent, unable to adjust to civilian life, fixating on a prominent community leader after a minor traffic incident. "What about the media angle?" Whitney asked, looking at her PR team. Sarah pulled up a draft press release. We've got 3 local news outlets ready to run the story. The angle is perfect. Respected philanthropist forced to seek protection from harassment. We'll emphasize your work with minority communities. Make any criticism seem racially motivated on her part. Beautiful, Whitney murmured. And the donors? Mike Davidson cleared his throat. I've already started making calls. Anyone who's been in contact with her will receive a gentle reminder about their business interests in Crest Hill. Most will fall in line. Whitney stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The lights of Crest Hill twinkled below, a display of the power and influence she'd spent years cultivating. I want this handled delicately. We're not attacking her. We're expressing concern, worried about her mental state, suggesting she needs help. The second lawyer, Patricia Wells, spoke up. The restraining order hearing is set for next week. Judge Matthews will preside. He's sympathetic to our interests. Perfect. Whitney turned back to the group. I want the media coverage to hit tomorrow morning. By evening, every social circle in Crest Hill should be talking about the unstable ex-FBI agent harassing their favorite philanthropist. Sarah typed rapidly. I'll coordinate with our media contacts. We'll start with subtle hints about her background, then escalate to concerned community members coming forward with stories. Make sure to emphasize the dog incident, Whitney added. Paint it as the trigger for her obsession. A sad story of someone who couldn't handle retirement, lost their pet, and spiraled into paranoid behavior. The meeting continued as they refined their strategy. Whitney's team worked with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role in the carefully orchestrated takedown. They drafted social media posts, prepared statements for friendly reporters, and mapped out a week's worth of coordinated pressure. As the meeting wound down, Whitney's phone buzzed with confirmation. The restraining order had been filed. Within hours, Amara would receive official notice of the hearing. Remember, Whitney said as her team gathered their materials, we're the victims here. Concerned citizens protecting our community from someone who's lost their way. No direct attacks, no obvious threats. Just steady, relentless pressure until she breaks or leaves. After everyone left, Whitney poured herself a glass of wine and savored her victory. She opened her laptop to check the first wave of social media posts. Right on schedule, carefully crafted rumors were already spreading through local community groups. Across town, Amara sat in her study, watching her phone light up with notifications. Local news sites, social media alerts, and text messages from acquaintances all carried variations of the same story. Headlines flashed across her screen. Former FBI agent accused of harassing local philanthropist. Community leader seeks protection from disturbed retiree. Questions raised about ex-federal agent's mental state. A heavy envelope arrived by courier. The restraining order hearing summons. Amara read it carefully, noting the judge's name, the detailed allegations, the carefully constructed narrative of harassment and instability. She placed the summons on her desk and looked at the news coverage again. Whitney's strategy was clever, a complete character assassination, wrapped in a veneer of concern and community protection. Every quote, every allegation was designed to isolate and discredit her. You want to play chess, Whitney? Amara said quietly, closing the browser window. Your move just opened my endgame. The morning sun barely crept over the horizon when Amara heard the soft thud of something landing on her front porch. She moved cautiously to the window, years of FBI training kicking in as she scanned the street. A courier's unmarked van pulled away, its taillights disappearing around the corner. Amara waited 5 minutes before opening her door. A plain manila envelope lay on her welcome mat, no markings except for a small black swan drawn in the corner. Her pulse quickened. The swan had been Project Swan Song's original symbol, but only 3 people knew that. Back in her study, Amara carefully examined the envelope. No signs of tampering. She slipped on latex gloves, old habits die hard, and gently opened the seal. The contents made her breath catch. High-resolution photos spilled onto her desk. Whitney and Darren at what appeared to be a private estate, shaking hands with men Amara recognized from intelligence briefings, Chinese business executives with known ties to foreign governments. More photos showed envelopes changing hands, documents being signed, but it was the financial records that made her sit up straight. Bank transfers, shell company formations, emails discussing campaign contributions through offshore accounts. Everything was meticulously organized, with relevant sections highlighted and annotated. A handwritten note on cream-colored stationery sat at the bottom of the pile. They ruined my life, too. Let's ruin theirs. Amara spread the evidence across her desk, mind racing. This was exactly what she needed. Proof of foreign interference in local politics, illegal campaign contributions, documented meetings with prohibited donors. But the source troubled her. Who else knew about Swan Song? Who had this level of access to the Lowells' private dealings? She picked up her encrypted phone, ready to call Calvin, then remembered he was still in custody. The ache of his absence hit her again. She'd need to vet this information herself. For the next 3 hours, Amara methodically authenticated each document. The banking records were genuine, complete with verification codes she could trace. The photos' metadata confirmed dates and locations. This wasn't a setup. This was a gold mine. Her burner phone buzzed with a text. Café Noir, 2 p.m., come alone. Window seat. Amara considered her options. This could be a trap. Whitney's team trying to catch her violating the restraining order. But her instincts, honed over decades of counterintelligence work, told her something else was at play. She chose her outfit carefully, casual enough to blend in, professional enough to command respect. A navy blazer over dark jeans, comfortable shoes she could run in if needed. She tucked a small recording device into her purse and headed out. Café Noir sat on the edge of downtown, far enough from Crest Hill to avoid Whitney's usual social circle. Amara arrived 20 minutes early, performing her standard security sweep of the area. Nothing seemed out of place. At exactly 2 p.m., a young woman walked in. Mid-20s, business casual attire, carrying a leather messenger bag. But it was her face that made Amara lean forward. She had Darren's sharp cheekbones and Whitney's elegant posture. Yet her complexion told a different story, one that explained everything. The woman sat down across from Amara, without introduction. "I assume you've reviewed the documents?" "I have," Amara replied carefully. "You're Darren's daughter, Avery Lowell." She said the name like it was both a badge and a burden. "Though they've spent years pretending I don't exist." "The black swan was a nice touch," Amara commented, studying the younger woman's face. "How did you know about Swan Song?" Avery pulled out her laptop. "I'm a legal intern at the National Whistleblower Center. We track federal cases, especially ones that get mysteriously closed. Swan Song caught my attention years ago. A corruption investigation suddenly shut down. All records sealed." "That doesn't explain your access to these documents," Amara pressed. "No, but this does." Avery turned her screen around, showing a family photo from years ago. A younger Darren stood proudly beside a black woman in a graduation gown, holding a baby. "My mother was his college sweetheart. They married young, had me." Then he met Whitney, and suddenly mixed-race families didn't fit the Lowell image anymore. Amara's expression softened slightly. "They wrote you out of the story. They tried." Avery's voice carried steel beneath its calm surface. "But I had my mother's brains and my father's determination. Got into law school, specialized in financial crimes. Started tracking their dealings through my work at the center. The foreign donations? Just the tip of the iceberg. Avery pulled out more files. They've been running a sophisticated influence operation. Buying judges, controlling zoning boards, funding shadow groups that push discriminatory policies. Whitney's campaign is their masterpiece. A chance to turn their informal power into official authority. Amara nodded slowly. And now you want to stop them. Why come to me? Because you've already started the work, Avery said. The evidence you've gathered through your Marla Jenkins persona, the financial trails you and Calvin uncovered, it's good. But what I have could blow it wide open. Calvin's arrest changed things, Amara warned. They're not playing nice anymore. I know. That's why I need your help. Avery leaned forward. I can't end up like Calvin, disappeared into some private detention center on trumped-up charges. I need protection before I go public. You want to go public? I want to destroy them, Avery said simply. Not just expose the corruption. I want to dismantle the entire system they've built. But I need to know you can keep me safe. Amara studied the young woman before her. She saw the same quiet fury she felt herself, but tempered with strategic patience. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. I can protect you, Amara said finally, but we do this my way. Clean, legal, and absolutely irrefutable. No loose ends they can use to discredit us. That's why I chose you. Avery reached into her bag and pulled out one final thumb drive. This contains everything. Every meeting, every bribe, every racist comment Whitney thought no one was recording. When do we start? We already have. Amara took the drive. Let's get to work. Back in her study that night, Amara stood before her command center, 3 monitors displaying different aspects of Project Swansong's original architecture. The system hummed to life, screens filling with data streams she hadn't accessed in years. This is impressive, Avery said, setting down her coffee. FBI tech? Modified. Amara's fingers flew across the keyboard. Calvin and I built this specifically for Swansong. It's designed to track and map influence networks, following money, relationships, and communication patterns. The main screen displayed a complex web of connections, with Whitney and Darren's names at the center. Red lines branched out to judges, police chiefs, and local officials. Green lines traced financial flows through various shell companies. Your father's network is actually larger than we originally suspected, Amara noted, expanding a cluster of data points. These offshore accounts, they're not just handling campaign money, they're laundering funds for half the power players in Virginia. Avery pulled up a chair, opening her laptop. That tracks with what I found. Here's their latest scheme. She transferred a file to Amara's system. They're using environmental cleanup grants to buy up properties in historically black neighborhoods. The cleanup is minimal, but it lets them jack up property values and force out long-time residents. Classic gentrification with a modern twist, Amara muttered, integrating the new data. The display shifted, revealing more connections. Look at this. The same judge who signed off on my restraining order approved every one of these property transfers. Judge Marcus Reynolds, Avery confirmed. Whitney's college roommate's husband. He's received over $2 million in campaign contributions from their hidden donor network. Amara opened a secure folder labeled Phase 1 and began organizing their evidence. We need to structure this carefully. The data dump has to tell a story that's impossible to ignore or discredit. For the next 3 hours, they methodically built their case. Avery's insider documents provided the foundation. Board meeting minutes, private emails, bank transfers. Amara's surveillance added another layer. Recorded conversations, photos of secret meetings, tracked vehicle movements. Here's something interesting, Avery said around midnight, stretching. Whitney's campaign website claims all donations are local, but I've got proof of Chinese investors funneling money through a Singapore holding company. That's a federal crime. Add it to the FEC violations folder, Amara replied, not looking up from her screen. She was deep in the code, building a distribution system that would release their evidence simultaneously to multiple targets. We need to make sure this hits everyone at once. No time for them to spin the narrative. Avery walked to the evidence wall they'd created, studying the photos and documents. You know what's ironic? They spent so much energy hiding me, treating me like their dirty secret. They never thought I'd be the one to expose all of theirs. Amara paused her typing, looking at the younger woman. Are you sure you want to go public? Once you do this, there's no going back. I stopped being afraid of them years ago, Avery said firmly. Besides, I've got something they don't. What's that? The truth. Avery smiled grimly. And nothing terrifies people like Whitney more than the truth they can't control. Amara nodded and returned to her work. The distribution system was complex. It had to be untraceable and failure-proof. Each target would receive a customized package: financial crimes for the SEC, campaign violations for the FEC, corruption evidence for the FBI, and comprehensive reports for selected journalists. What about Calvin? Avery asked softly. How do we help him? The cybercrime charges against him are fake, Amara explained, pulling up his case file. Once we expose the network that ordered his arrest, those charges collapse. I've already prepared his release documentation. It'll go to the federal prosecutor's office in the first wave. Around 2 a.m., they finished compiling the master file. Amara ran it through multiple encryption layers, then created secure backup copies. Now for the timing, she said, pulling up Whitney's campaign schedule. Her big campaign launch is next week, Avery noted. Live-streamed across 3 counties, major donors in attendance. She's been planning it for months. Perfect. Amara began programming the release sequence. The data goes out to authorities 1 hour before the event. By the time you take the stage, they'll already be mobilizing. You really think I can just walk up there? Avery asked. Their security is tight. That's where this comes in. Amara handed her a donor invitation, courtesy of your father's private email, which he really should have better protected. You'll be on the VIP list, his daughter, coming to support the campaign. Avery examined the invitation, her hands slightly trembling. They won't expect me. They never do. That's their weakness, Amara said. They're so convinced of their own power. They never look for threats from people they've dismissed. They spent another hour fine-tuning the plan. Amara set up secure communication channels and emergency protocols. Every contingency was covered, every escape route mapped. Finally, Amara initiated the countdown sequence. The system would hold their evidence in encrypted suspension until the designated release time. Once started, it couldn't be stopped. 1 week, she said, watching the timer lock in. 1 week until Whitney's perfect world falls apart. Avery gathered her things, pausing at the door. Why did you name it Swan Song? Because in nature, swans mate for life, Amara explained. When one dies, the other doesn't just mourn. It makes sure everyone knows. Its cry is beautiful and terrible at the same time. Like justice, Avery said softly. Like justice, Amara agreed, thinking of Kobe. She turned back to her monitors, where the countdown quietly ticked away. In 7 days, Whitney would learn what happens when you mistake silence for weakness and patience for fear. The grand ballroom of the Crest Hill Country Club sparkled with crystal chandeliers and campaign banners. Red, white, and blue decorations draped every surface, and a massive Whitney Ashcroft Lowell for City Council banner dominated the stage. Professional cameras lined the back wall, their red lights blinking, ready to live-stream the event across 3 counties. Whitney stood in the wings, checking her reflection one final time. Her cream-colored designer suit was immaculate, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She adjusted her American flag pin and smiled at her campaign manager. "How's the turnout?" she asked, though she already knew. The ballroom was packed with Crest Hill's elite, judges, business owners, and social leaders who'd backed her rise to power. "Standing room only," her manager confirmed. "We've got reporters from every major outlet in Virginia, plus some national coverage. The live stream is already getting huge numbers." Whitney's smile widened. This was her moment, the official launch of her campaign, though she'd been laying the groundwork for months. Tonight would cement her image as Crest Hill's next great leader. In the audience, Amara sat quietly in the middle section, dressed elegantly in navy blue. She watched donors mill about, champagne glasses in hand, congratulating themselves on backing a winner. Her phone buzzed silently, a message from Calvin's lawyer confirming receipt of the evidence package. The lights dimmed. Dramatic music swelled through the speakers. Whitney's campaign video began playing on the massive screens, carefully crafted footage showing her at charity events, talking to constituents, always surrounded by carefully selected, diverse supporters. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "please welcome your next city council member, Whitney Ashcroft Lowell." The crowd erupted in applause as Whitney strode onto stage, waving and beaming. She looked every inch the polished politician, radiating confidence and charm. Thank you all so much," she began, her voice carrying perfectly through the sound system. "I'm overwhelmed by your support tonight. When I look out at this crowd, I see the heart and soul of Crest Hill. I see people who understand that our community's values must be protected." In the back of the room, Avery slipped in through a service entrance, her VIP pass getting her past security. She wore a simple black dress, her father's features evident in her face. No one recognized her. They never had. Whitney continued her speech, hitting all her carefully rehearsed points. "We stand at a crossroads. Will we maintain the character of our beautiful neighborhood, or will we let outside forces change what makes Crest Hill special?" The crowd murmured in agreement. In her seat, Amara checked her watch. Right on schedule, her phone lit up with notifications. The evidence was going live across multiple platforms. "I promise you," Whitney declared, her voice rising passionately, "I will fight to preserve our way of life. I will ensure that Crest Hill remains the kind of place where good families can feel safe, where our children can grow up with proper values." "What about your husband's children?" Avery's voice cut through the air, clear and strong. She stood in the center aisle, microphone in hand, courtesy of a sympathetic tech worker who'd received the evidence an hour ago. Whitney faltered for a split second, then tried to continue. But Avery was already walking forward, her heels clicking against the floor in the sudden silence. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Avery said, her voice carrying through the sound system, "but I think it's time we talked about family values. Real ones." Security started moving, but stopped when Avery reached the stage. Something in her bearing, her confidence, made them hesitate. "Who are you?" Whitney demanded, her perfect smile slipping. "My name is Avery Lowell," she announced, turning to face the crowd and cameras. "I'm Darren Lowell's daughter, the one they tried to erase because a biracial child didn't fit their image." Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones started lighting up as news alerts hit. The story was breaking nationally. "But I'm not here about personal grievances," Avery continued, as images began appearing on the screens behind Whitney. "I'm here about corruption, fraud, and hate crimes happening right here in Crest Hill." Whitney lunged for her own microphone, but it had gone dead. The tech team was no longer under her control. The screens filled with documents, photos, financial records, all the evidence Amara had helped compile. "These are bank records showing illegal foreign campaign contributions," Avery explained as the documents scrolled past. Here are emails proving judicial bribes, property theft, and systematic discrimination against minority homeowners. In the audience, several people stood up and walked out, including Judge Reynolds, his face ashen. Others sat frozen, watching their carefully constructed world unravel. "And this," Avery said as new footage appeared, "is Whitney Ashcroft Lowell deliberately running down a black resident's dog, then laughing about it with friends. The same incident the police refused to investigate." The security footage played in horrible clarity. Whitney's Tesla swerving, the impact, the laughter. The audience watched in stunned silence. "Right now," Avery announced, "federal authorities are receiving detailed evidence of every crime, every cover-up, every act of corruption. The offshore accounts are being frozen. The investigations are beginning." Whitney stood paralyzed on stage, her perfect image shattering as camera flashes caught her expression of rage and fear. In the wings, her campaign manager was frantically checking his phone, watching the story explode across national media. "You see," Avery said, turning to face Whitney directly, "the problem with building an empire on lies is that it only takes one person with the truth to bring it down." Through the windows, red and blue lights began flashing in the parking lot. Federal agents were arriving, right on schedule. The crowd erupted in chaos. Donors rushing for exits, reporters shouting questions, cameras rolling as Whitney's carefully orchestrated campaign launch transformed into her public undoing. In her seat, Amara watched it all unfold. She thought of Kobe, of justice, of patience rewarded. Whitney had never imagined this moment. She'd never believed consequences could touch her. But that was the thing about consequence. It didn't care what you believed. The heavy doors of the ballroom burst open. A team of FBI agents in dark jackets moved in with practiced precision, their badges gleaming under the crystal chandeliers. The chaos in the room shifted from panicked confusion to stunned silence as federal authorities spread through the crowd. "FBI! Nobody leave the premises!" The lead agent's voice carried over the murmuring crowd. Darren Lowell burst through a side door, his face red with rage. "Whitney, we need to—" He froze mid-sentence as two agents intercepted him. "Darren Lowell," one agent announced, pulling out handcuffs, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and violation of federal campaign finance laws." The crowd watched in shocked silence as Darren was cuffed center stage, the same platform where his wife had stood moments ago, promising to protect community values. His perfectly tailored suit wrinkled as the agents secured his hands behind his back. "You can't do this," Darren sputtered, his composed businessman facade cracking. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my friends are?" "Your friends are being arrested across 3 states right now," the agent replied calmly, leading him toward the exit. Whitney, who had backed away from the podium during Avery's revelation, saw her opportunity in the commotion. She slipped behind the stage curtain, her cream-colored heels clicking against the wooden floor, as she hurried toward the service exit. Her mind raced with contingency plans, the private jet at Dulles, the accounts in the Caymans, the backup identities they'd prepared for just such an emergency. She pushed through the kitchen area, past startled servers who pressed themselves against walls to avoid her. The back door was just ahead. Freedom was just going somewhere? Whitney stopped cold. Amara Thomas stepped out from behind a storage rack, blocking her path. She wore a navy blue blazer and carried herself with the quiet authority of her FBI years. "Get out of my way!" Whitney hissed, glancing frantically for another exit. "You know," Amara said conversationally, moving closer, "I've spent 30 years watching people like you run when their worlds collapse. They always run the same way, entitled to the very end, believing they can escape consequences just like they always have." Whitney backed up, her designer heels scraping against the kitchen floor. "You don't understand. I'm not like them. I have connections. I have had," Amara corrected. "You had connections. But right now, every person you counted on is either being arrested or destroying evidence of their association with you. That's how corruption works, Whitney. Everyone's loyal until they're not." Whitney's back hit a metal shelf. Her perfectly styled hair was coming undone, her composed mask cracking. "This is about that stupid dog, isn't it? I offered to pay you. I sent Darren to make it right." "No," Amara said, her voice hardening. "This is about every person you've hurt, every life you've ruined, every time you thought your money made you untouchable. Kobe was just the last mistake you made, the one that made me stop watching and start acting." Whitney lunged suddenly, trying to shove past Amara. But 30 years of FBI training doesn't fade with retirement. Amara moved with fluid precision, catching Whitney's arm and using her momentum to spin her around. In one smooth motion, she had Whitney's arm pinned behind her back, pressed against the industrial refrigerator. "Let me go!" Whitney struggled, but Amara's grip was iron steady. "You can't do this to me! I'm Whitney Ashcroft Lowell." "That's right," Amara said softly, her mouth close to Whitney's ear. "You're Whitney Ashcroft Lowell, and I'm just an old black lady whose dog you killed. Except I'm also the former FBI agent who spent decades building cases against people exactly like you. You thought you could hurt anyone you wanted, that your money made you invincible." Whitney's struggles weakened as the reality of her situation sank in. Through the kitchen doors, they could hear agents calling out commands, the sound of more arrests being made. "You thought I was just some old black lady with a dead dog," Amara continued, her voice carrying years of witnessed injustice. "Turns out I was your reckoning." The kitchen doors swung open. 2 FBI agents entered, handcuffs ready. "Whitney Ashcroft Lowell," the first agent announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and criminal harassment." Amara stepped back, letting the agents take Whitney into custody. The once proud socialite's mascara was smeared now, her perfect image completely shattered. As they led her through the kitchen and back into the main ballroom, camera flashes erupted. Reporters shouted questions. The crowd that had come to celebrate her campaign launch now recorded her disgrace on their phones. "This is a mistake," Whitney screamed as they led her through the gauntlet of cameras. "Don't you know who I am? I'm Whitney Ashcroft Lowell." But the name no longer carried weight. In fact, it was already becoming synonymous with corruption and scandal, as news alerts buzzed on hundreds of phones throughout the ballroom. The carefully crafted image of power and respectability that Whitney had built over decades crumbled in minutes under the harsh lights of justice and exposure. Amara watched from the kitchen doorway as Whitney was escorted out, her cream-colored suit now wrinkled and stained, her carefully styled hair falling around her face. The woman who had laughed after killing Kobe, who had dismissed Amara as beneath her notice, who had built an empire on other people's pain, was reduced to what she truly was, just another criminal being led away in handcuffs. In the chaos of arrests and camera flashes, Avery caught Amara's eye from across the room and gave a small nod. They had done it. The corruption that had seemed untouchable was being dismantled piece by piece, all because they had refused to back down, refused to be silenced. The morning news played quietly on Amara's kitchen TV as she prepared her coffee. 2 weeks had passed since Whitney and Darren's arrests, but the story still dominated the headlines. In continuing coverage of the Lowell corruption scandal, the anchor reported, 3 more judges have stepped down following evidence of bribery and campaign finance violations. The investigation has now spread to neighboring districts. Amara stirred her coffee, watching as familiar faces flashed across the screen. officials she'd seen at Whitney's parties, power players who'd looked right through her as if she were invisible. Now they were all scrambling to distance themselves from the Lowells. Her phone buzzed with a text from Calvin. "Turn to Channel 7. She switched channels just in time to see Calvin himself walking out of the federal courthouse, surrounded by reporters. His attorney stood beside him, announcing that all charges had been dropped and a formal apology issued by the Justice Department. Mr. Ruiz was targeted as part of a coordinated attempt to silence whistleblowers, the attorney stated. The evidence clearly shows these false charges were orchestrated by individuals now under federal investigation. The camera zoomed in on Calvin's face. Despite 2 weeks in custody, he looked composed and determined. When a reporter asked how he felt about his release, he simply said, "The truth always comes out. Sometimes it just needs a little help." Amara smiled, remembering their secure call last night. Calvin had already started rebuilding his cybersecurity firm, with several major clients reaching out after learning he'd helped expose the corruption network. His reputation wasn't just restored, it was enhanced. The doorbell rang. Amara opened it to find Avery on her porch, holding a thick folder and wearing a satisfied smile. "Have you seen the morning papers?" Avery asked, stepping inside. She spread several newspapers across Amara's kitchen counter. Each headline told another piece of the story. Police chief resigns amid Lowell scandal probe. Judicial Review Board launches investigation into Crest Hill Court. Asset seizure begins. Lowell properties face foreclosure. "It's like dominoes," Avery said, pouring herself coffee. "Every day, another corrupt official steps down. Another dirty deal gets exposed." She paused, looking out the window toward her father's, now former, neighborhood. They really thought they were untouchable. "Power does that," Amara replied. "It makes people forget that everything they build on lies can come crashing down." They were interrupted by another knock. Calvin entered, looking tired but triumphant. The three of them hadn't been together since before his arrest. "Welcome back to the free world," Amara said, hugging him tightly. "Good to be back," Calvin replied. "Though I have to say, 2 weeks in federal custody gave me some interesting perspective on our justice system." "Speaking of justice," Avery said, opening her folder, "I've been working on something." She spread out legal documents across the counter. "The seized assets from my father and Whitney's accounts. There's a provision that allows for civil penalties to be directed toward community restitution." "I'm listening," Amara said, studying the papers. "I want to establish a legal defense fund," Avery continued, "specifically focused on civil rights cases and fighting systemic discrimination in the justice system. We could name it after Kobe." "The Kobe Thomas Memorial Fund," Calvin mused, "has a nice ring to it. It would provide resources for people who can't afford to fight back when the system is stacked against them," Avery explained. "Free legal representation, investigation services, advocacy support, everything we needed to take down Whitney and Darren, but available to anyone facing similar battles." Through the kitchen window, they could see moving trucks parked outside Whitney's mansion. Workers carried out expensive furniture and artwork, preparing the property for seizure and sale. The for sale sign already stood crooked in the perfectly manicured lawn. "Whitney's house will probably sell for millions," Calvin noted. "That alone could fund legal support for dozens of cases." "Hundreds," Avery corrected, "especially once we add in the offshore accounts they're still uncovering. My father was very thorough about hiding money, but not thorough enough." Amara watched the movers work, remembering how Whitney had stood in that same driveway weeks ago, laughing about killing Kobe. Now her carefully curated life was being packed into boxes and carted away. "The fund isn't just about legal support," Avery continued. "It's about changing the power dynamics, making sure that the next time someone like Whitney thinks they can hurt people without consequences, they'll think twice. Because they'll know someone's watching, Calvin added. Someone with the resources and knowledge to hold them accountable. Amara sipped her coffee, considering the proposal. Through the window, she could see new families walking their dogs along the sidewalk where Kobe had died. The construction barriers finally removed, the path clear and safe. You know what the hardest part of this whole thing was? She said quietly. Not the surveillance, not the undercover work, not even watching Calvin get arrested. It was that moment right after Kobe died, when Whitney looked at me like I was nothing. Like my pain meant nothing. Like she could just walk away, and her money would protect her from consequences. But it didn't, Avery said firmly. No, Amara agreed. It didn't. And now we have a chance to make sure it doesn't protect others like her. They watched as the movers carried out Whitney's prized crystal chandelier, the one she'd bragged about at her last dinner party. It caught the morning light, sending rainbow reflections across the street. The fund needs a board of directors, Avery said, sliding over another document. People with experience in law enforcement, civil rights, and fighting corruption. People who understand both sides of the system. Calvin picked up his coffee cup. I think I know a couple of qualified candidates. The morning sun painted long shadows across Crest Hill's manicured lawns as Amara adjusted the new leather leash in her hand. Justice, a young German shepherd with alert ears and intelligent eyes, walked steadily beside her. His paw pads were still soft, unused to suburban sidewalks, but his military training showed in his perfect heel position. She'd found him at a rescue specializing in retired service dogs. Justice had washed out of police training. Too gentle, they'd said, more interested in comforting people than confrontation. That gentleness was exactly what had drawn Amara to him. As they rounded the corner where Kobe had died, Amara felt the familiar tightness in her chest. But now, the construction barriers were gone, replaced by fresh concrete and safety railings. The neighborhood association had fast-tracked the improvements after the scandal broke, especially once documents revealed how Whitney had delayed the repairs to save money for her campaign. "Morning, Ms. Thomas," called Mrs. Chen from her garden. Just weeks ago, the elderly woman had avoided eye contact. Now she stood up, pulling off her gardening gloves. "Is this the new addition I've been hearing about?" "This is Justice," Amara said, allowing the shepherd to sit politely as Mrs. Chen approached. "He's learning the neighborhood." "Such a handsome boy." Mrs. Chen's eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. "You know, I always wanted to tell you about what happened with your other dog. I saw it from my window, but I was afraid to speak up. The way they had influence over everything." She shook her head. "I'm sorry I stayed quiet." "You're speaking now," Amara said gently. "That's what matters." They chatted a few minutes longer before continuing their walk. Similar encounters happened every few houses. Neighbors who'd once hurried inside now stopped to talk. Some offered belated condolences about Kobe. Others shared their own stories of witnessing Whitney's casual cruelty over the years. Justice's ears perked up as they passed the park where the campaign rally had imploded. The cleanup crew had long since removed the stage and cameras, but Amara could still picture Avery standing there, speaking truth to power with unwavering strength. Now the space hosted a weekly community forum where residents discussed real issues facing Crest Hill: affordable housing, education equity, police reform. A jogger slowed as she passed, pulling out her earbuds. Amara recognized her as Whitney's former personal trainer. "Ms. Thomas, I've been hoping to run into you." She caught her breath. "I'm testifying next week about the discriminatory membership policies at the country club. The ones Whitney pushed through the board. Would you mind looking over my statement?" "Of course," Amara replied. "Stop by this afternoon, and bring any documentation you have." The woman beamed. "Thank you. You know, what you did standing up to them. It gave a lot of us courage to finally speak out. As she jogged away, Justice nudged Amara's hand with his nose, sensing her momentary tension. She scratched behind his ears, grateful for his intuitive nature. He wasn't Kobe, no dog ever would be, but he had his own way of offering comfort. They passed the courthouse where Calvin had been falsely charged. The building looked different now, less imposing somehow. 3 judges' names had already been removed from the directory, with more under investigation. The new district attorney had promised a complete review of every case touched by Whitney's network of influence. A local news van was parked outside, probably covering another resignation. The reporter recognized Amara and raised her hand in greeting, but didn't approach. They'd learned to respect her privacy after she'd declined dozens of interview requests. The story wasn't about her, after all. It was about power, accountability, and the quiet courage of speaking up. Justice's pace quickened slightly as they approached Whitney's former mansion. He could probably smell the anxiety that still lingered in Amara's body whenever they passed this spot. The moving trucks were gone now, leaving only empty windows and dead flowers in the precisely arranged gardens. Whitney's prized roses had withered without her obsessive attention. The for sale sign tilted at an awkward angle, its perfect white surface already showing signs of weather damage. Through the gates, Amara could see the fountain where Whitney had hosted her infamous charitable garden parties, events designed to showcase her wealth while quietly excluding anyone who didn't fit her vision of the right kind of people. A maintenance worker was draining the fountain, preparing the property for new owners. He waved at Amara. "The neighborhood association approved your proposal," he called out. "Once this sells, the proceeds are going straight to the Housing Assistance Fund." Amara nodded her thanks. The fountain's murky water spiraled down the drain, taking with it the last traces of Whitney's artificial paradise. Soon, this house would belong to a new family, one that had earned their place through honest work, rather than manipulation and privilege. Justice sat unprompted, looking up at Amara with those intelligent eyes. He'd learned quickly that she often needed these moments of quiet reflection. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and new beginnings. Standing there, Amara thought about all the small acts of courage that had brought them to this point. Not just her investigation or Avery's testimony, but every person who'd finally found their voice, every witness who'd stepped forward, every official who'd chosen integrity over influence. She reached down to pet Justice's head, feeling the soft fur between his ears. "Let's go, boy," she said quietly. "The world still needs watching." They turned east, walking into the rising sun. Behind them, Whitney's empty house stood silent, its shadows growing shorter in the morning light. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.